The Reeve's tale continues a kind of downward trajectory in tone, where you get the first instance of a character really picking at directly at another one of the pilgrims as an individual. It's an ad hominem attack, essentially. He feels challenged because the previous story, the Miller's story, was very funny, but in it, the character of the carpenter comes under some he's basically made fun of, and the Reeve Aligns is also a carpenter, but he takes exception to this. So he wants to get back at the Miller. So he tells a story. Then he insists on telling a story. He jumps in, and he tells a story about a corrupt Miller. And the story itself, well, the whole Reeve's tale and prologue is it's about hostility. It's about anger. It's about opposition. And he takes exception. He feels attacked by the Miller's tale, so he lashes back. And he complains about, he identifies himself very specifically and early as an old man as opposed to a young man. So, the tale of the younger people in the Miller story was, somehow oppositional to him, offensive to him, and he takes offense to it. So he's going to tell this story of fairly disturbing story, honestly, about a Miller, and the it's a story of a fairly ignorant little Miller named Simpkin, who is known to be a bit of a cheat. He's always scamming a portion of whatever grain or corn or whatever he is given to grind. He's made it his custom that, I'm going to be doing this for a while. Why don't you go take a walk, and then you come back and it'll be all ground for you. I'll have it in a bag and you can take it. And he usually, takes a little portion of it without telling anybody. So he's got a little gig going for himself, and he lives at his mill with his wife, who is much younger than he is, which is always a troubling sign when you have an older man and a younger woman. These things happen. But they also have a young daughter, apparently of at least teenage years. And the two young students from, I believe it's Cambridge, come by, and they have heard that this Miller is particularly, skimpy and corrupt. So they're going to go, and they decide, we're going to come and we're going to keep an eye on him. So when he invites them to leave, they don't, and they make a point of just sitting there and watching, so that, if you keep your eye on him, he can't really do anything. He can't cheat. And for whatever reason, again, oppositional. You get these young students. They're students. They're presumably, very well educated. The Miller is not. They are young. The Miller has made a point to say he is not. So you get these differences coming at it. And then the story layers in yet another, in that he gives them Chaucer gives them accents, gives them a status of being out of towners. They are from the north of England, and they have a very pronounced dialect, which is very hard to get in translation from, we're already getting translated from Middle English, London Middle English. So the translation from Northern English is it's a tough feat to pull off. Presumably the jokes land better in the original. Yeah, but the students come and they watch and they say, you know, and the Miller's kind of irritated watching. He's like, you know, what are you doing to me? What are you staring? And he's dropping hints saying, you know, get lost. And no, we're just going to stay and watch. And he gets irritated and he goes at one point and after he has finished up the grinding and they're presumably getting ready to pay and leave with all of the goods that they have paid for, that the Miller does not want to happen, the Miller goes and, well, they let the horse go that these young men came in on, and they untie him from his bridle or whatever, and they let him run off. And they, oh my God, we got to go get our horse. So they leave everything there, their corn, their money, whatever, and they run to go get the horse. And, you know, a horse is a horse. It's, of course, it's going to run very quickly, especially if you chase it. And so they spend a good deal of time getting that, and by the time they finally get it, they finally recapture the horse and bring him back to the mill. It's dark out. It's late, and you know, traveling at night is it's touchy business. Nobody really wants to do it. So it's well, okay, I guess you boys can stay here. The Miller lets them in, and it's a very small place, and he sort of makes fun of them, saying, well, you know, it's only around 20 square feet, but of course, you know, with your philosophizing, you can imagine infinite space or something like that. And it's, you know, it's a little bit of a jab. Again, antagonism, difference, just pointing those little things out, just chafing at the little oddities between them, the little estrangements. They go to sleep or they lie down, everybody goes to bed, essentially in the same room. And the one of the students, it's a little disturbing, but lying next to the daughter, again, presumably late teenage, I would hope, lying next to the daughter, he starts to get amorous. He just essentially rolls over on her and starts away. Now, it is disturbing to a modern reader to see this, especially in the story itself. It seems like, you know, there was no sweet talk, there was no anything. Apparently, there's no reason to believe that they knew one another in any way, shape, or form, or had even exchanged a single word. So what we're talking about is, of course, rape, and that's difficult, that's challenging, that's touchy. But put that aside. This is not, you know, this is essentially this is a very old form. A fabliau is what it's called, the old French storytelling form. This particular one has has some precedence. Some scholars trace the actual story to Boccaccio. Whatever. You can't take the surface of it, all of that seriously in any of these stories. It is on that level. I think I think you're supposed to interpret it as another story of just good old lusty, you know, common folk. Okay. And then the wife gets up in the middle of the night and starts stumbling around in the dark. And one thing leads to another. She ends up back next to the second friend, and they start in on it. And the suggestion is that all have a very good time. There's no particular offense to it. In the morning, well, the Miller gets outraged at the students when he finds out that that one of them has been you know, about his daughter, and they have a little joke about, you know, the Miller's daughter helped me grind my corn. Which is what the Miller does, and he makes a euphemism at it. 3 times the neat from midnight to morn, 3 times in an evening. It's good to be young. The Miller's outraged at this. He and the student fight. they knock over the wife. The wife screams, and it comes out that she had been with the other guy, and the daughter goes, and because there's a great big scuffle, and the daughter comes, grabs a stick and whacks to try and break up the fight, ends up clobbering her father on the head, and he collapses and starts screaming, "Oh God, I'm dying." He's bleeding all over the place. And that's pretty much the end of the story. It's just a very bawdy, ribald joke. And it's coming from the Reeve, who started as a kind of hostile notion. And the only joke in it, really, is that the Miller, who is the figure that the Reeve is so interested in pillorying for the previous Miller's story, is the Miller has his daughter sexually assaulted, he has his wife sexually assaulted, and he is beaten up in the end. And that's the whole joke. It's not much of a joke in that. And that's kind of the thing, because it starts from such a nasty place, quite frankly, on the Reeve's part. He starts from antagonism, and he just sort of dwells in that. And it gets, kind of nasty throughout, and it ends poorly. You can read into that any number of ways you want. It's not a particularly exciting story. It has its funny moments, but seen in context of the descent from the Knight story to the Miller story to now here, it just sort of sputters out. And this is very significant, I think, when you get to the very next story, is the Cook story, because after that story, they have a little thing where the cook starts laughing, and he takes the greatest humor out of it. He's warming up, so he is going to tell a story now, too. Now, significantly, however, he's telling a story of a layabout apprentice who's kind of lazy and a screw-up, and he's always gambling and running off and ignoring his job and forgetting about his work and all of this. And he likes to have fun. And he gets fired, and he hooks up with a friend of his who's a thief, and the thief knows a prostitute. So we have all of these elements getting tossed in of a downward trajectory of respectability, if nothing else. And then the story just ends. And it's an aborted story. Supposedly, Chaucer never wrote the end of it, but it just sort of craps out. Now, Chaucer, he's going to begin and fail to finish a couple of things. It's just another incomplete thing. Maybe he didn't mean for this to be included at all. We just don't know. But again, you get this sense, the way it is now, the way it is as it's added in, is that it's just one more negative blind alley that the narrative sort of stumbles into. So, I'm probably reading way too much into this, but it works on that interpretive level, because you're getting more and more negative. You're getting more and more antisocial, more and more angry and ugly, and it leads nowhere. And maybe that's the point Chaucer is trying to make in this opening section, the opening section of the entire Canterbury Tales. Famously, he did intend to write more, of course, so the idea of beginnings and endings and what is a complete whole is just completely off base with this whole work. But as it stands now, there is a kind of a arc to this first 4 stories that bring you in and give you a sense of, okay, where does this whole work go? What is it doing as we have it? Maybe not as Chaucer intended, but as it is right now on the page. What have we got? What can we make of it? Maybe it is, whether it's trying to say something or not, maybe it does say something about what can be made out of the negative, the nasty, the ugly. Where does that road lead? in a story about a pilgrimage. Maybe roads are important.